Adrienne N. Breitfelder, City Clerk, you are hereby directed to call a special session of the City Council to be held on Monday, July 25th, 2022 at 6 p.m. in the Historic Federal Building for the purpose of conducting work sessions to receive updates on conceptual development in the Southport and the reuse study for the city-owned 5th Street site.
Thank you. Good evening, and welcome to a special session of the Dubuque City Council for July 25th, 2022. As a reminder to viewers and listeners, due to the nature of tonight's meeting topic, public input is not accepted. However, you may contact the City Council directly from the city's webpage at www.cityofdubuque.org/councilcontacts. Attendance for the session is as follows. Mayor Kavanaugh?
Here.
Council members Resnick?
Here.
Roussel?
Here.
Sprank?
Here.
Wethel?
Here.
City Manager Van Milligan? Here. City Attorney Brumwell?
Here.
Thank you. Our first work session topic is Southport Conceptual Redevelopment. I will turn it over to Economic Development Director Jill Connors.
Good evening. Jill Connors, Economic Development Director here at the city. And we're excited to share some information with you today about the Southport. As a little bit of history, we've been studying, and by we, I mean before I got to the city, for 20 years we've been looking at what could happen there. It looks like what the Northport used to look like. So in 2002, with the assistance of the planning department and I'm sure engineering, sorry, I wasn't here, there was some study that happened in both the North and the Southport, and a Port of Dubuque master plan was put together. So that was 2002. Flash forward to 2013, because there was no, there was some intermediate activity on the port. The museum, the River Museum came, the Diamond Joe came, and we had the hotel and conference center come. So there was some advancement on the Northport. However, there was still some opportunity in the Southport. In 2013, the planning department worked with University of Iowa, and some students came and did another study update as part of one of their classes. So they did some public engagement there and put together an updated plan specifically for the Southport. Then in 2015, we had an EPA Brownfields planning grant, and with those grant funds, we hired a consultant to come in again and speak with the property owners and gauge their interest in moving forward on any development plans, as well as, doing some public engagement again to see what might be palatable and feasible to do in the area. So that was 7 years ago. Meanwhile, again, we've had no activity there, but then about 5 months ago, Matt Mulligan from Conlin Construction came to us, said he had been having conversations with the Newt family of Newt Marine, and they were contemplating some redevelopment in the area. And could we talk about how that might look? Again, we had EPA Brownfields grant funding that would support bringing on a consultant. So we brought on RDG, since they're already familiar with the Conlin construction team. They're familiar with us. So they were brought on underneath of those grant funds to sit down with us and do some planning. So that's what's brought us here today, is some updated planning, knowing that now we've got some interest in actually spending some dollars here. So we thought it was time to do that. I'm going to let Steve Brown from the engineering department come on up and talk a little bit more about the grants. Thank you.
So good evening, Steve Sampson Brown, project manager with the engineering department. So just in terms of the current US EPA grant, so going back prior to COVID, which was a ways ago, the city was in a position where we were able to be awarded an $800,000 US EPA multi-purpose grant. And the phrase multi-purpose means traditionally the US EPA has buckets of assessment money, planning money, and then cleanup money. And the multi-purpose grant just means it's one pot of money and we can do all three of those things. So although the grant was awarded prior to COVID, COVID hit, the city has to draft what they call a work plan and get that approved by the US EPA. During most of the pandemic, the US EPA was not able to review and respond to our work plan. Therefore, it sat until approximately about a year ago. So we did get that work plan finally approved. And there's 5 basic parts to the work plan. There's the grant administration, there's community engagement, there is assessment dollars, so we can do a few assessments of different properties, phase 1, phase 2 environmental assessments of private property owners, reuse planning, and then cleanup. So the 3 cleanup sites, we tried to strategize on what the locations during the application process would help the city. So one of those sites is Comiskey Park, and there's that chunk of land that's between the original Comiskey Park and the Morrison Brothers building that had some contamination on it. So we'll be able to expand the park renovation budgets by being able to spend money at that location. And of course, on the city's always owned properties in the Southport. And those are long industrial properties with some typical contaminants that you would see down there. So that was identified as the cleanup. The only city dollars going into this is actually staff time. There's no financial match, just a $40,000 local match, which is my time, Kristen Hill's time, Jill Connor's time, and we calibrate that. So, and before I turn it over to Ryan, by coincidence this weekend, I happened to be reading Great by Choice by Jim Collins and Morton Hansen. I felt as I was reading it, geez, there's a lot of parallels with the Southport. So in that book, he talks about fire bullets first to calibrate, then fire cannonballs. And the bullets are collecting empirical data in small chunks, affordable chunks, before you make a big decision and take a step in the wrong direction versus the right direction. So I feel like the past 20 years, we've done firing our small bullets. What you're gonna hear tonight, both for the Southport and the Northport, is more small bullets being fired to calibrate. The city has fired some of those. You'll hear that our developers team from Conlon Construction have fired some of those. Then they also talk about zooming out to consider change conditions and then zoom back in again. So as we've gone through these plans that Jill mentioned, we've stepped out, then we've decided to come back. And now, again, with the economy being where it is, knowledge-based workers being a thing, a growing active retiree field of people that are looking for exciting places to live, I personally feel like it's time to zoom back in. So this is a good time to spend these reuse dollars that are in this grant on this particular location. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ryan to give you more details.
Okay, good evening. Ryan Peterson with RDG Planning and Design. It's a pleasure to be back here. We've put together a brief presentation and some acknowledgement here before we begin. Partners on the project, RDG is working for Blackstone Environmental, who is the grant consultant for the city. And then these individuals here are working in parallel for the city of Dubuque in collaboration. It's been a great team. We've been able to make some good progress in a relatively short amount of time. Steve and Jill mentioned the project background and then the planning funding, which is paying for this effort right here. We'll walk through what's taken place to date and where we're going to go. And actually, let me jump back here a slide. So we'll talk about the program. When we say program, those are the components that we should contemplate to make this a livable space, a space that is accessible to the river, a space that has a sense of place. And we want to make sure that what we are proposing also works with what is driving it from a private sector standpoint in the marketplace. So there's a little bit of a checks and balance that goes on. And so we'll share some of that with you. Talk a little bit about the context of the site, our overall vision, and then Conlon Construction will come up and share their perspective, and then from there we would be happy to take your questions. So first off, the background and planning funding. As Jill mentioned, we started back in February with meetings with the stakeholders, and to date we've met with Newt Marine, members of the family there. We've met with Mark Molo with Molo Companies. We've talked to the owners of Mutual Wheel. The city has also talked with the Coast Guard and a number of other agency partners in preparation for this. And so far, we have generally a supportive environment, and they appreciate what they're being shown here. I think there's probably going to be, obviously, next steps. There'll be more questions, and so but you need to start somewhere. So we had those conversations. We developed a program. We developed some themes, which we'll share with you. Had a work session back in early June where we could start to test some of those ideas. And then from there, we've gone into the production mode where you'll see the graphics that we are presenting tonight. So we already went over the collective team, the brownfields funding, and then the existing CIP that the city has that's paying for some of the parallel engineering services. So let's begin with the strategy or the emerging themes that came out of the conversation. I think first and foremost, what we heard when we sat down and interviewed the stakeholders that were at the table is that this needs to be a partnership approach. They would like to see significant private investment that is paralleled with public investment, and I think what we've started to hear a little bit is about the millwork district model. Secondly, talent recruitment and retention. This is a big one from the private sector's perspective. There are tremendous opportunities to connect to the existing infrastructure in the Northport, within Lower Main. There are the riverfront itself, and so there's an opportunity here to really create a destination that has essentially a flag that can be used to attract talent that we need within the community. 3, quality of life spaces. So not only can you work here, you can live here, you can recreate here, you can dine here, and you're on the water, being the ice harbor, or you're looking at the water, being the Mississippi River. That access and those view sheds presents a great opportunity. A few additional things we heard is this space wants to have a mix of uses. It wants to be vibrant, thinking primarily commercial, multifamily residential, recreation, entertainment, potentially leisure, and some office. 5, connectivity. We keep hearing about we want to be connected to Lower Main, to the existing investments that you've made, the Port of Dubuque, the downtown. Connecting by foot, by vehicle, by boat, those are all considerations that we want to make sure that we bring into this planning effort. Preserving the green space. The city currently owns a significant amount of green space along the riverfront as you move south, and we'll show you here in a minute what that looks like. But that was a key thing that was attractive to the development team and to the private sector. There's an opportunity there, though, to activate that space that can provide a benefit to the greater community, not just what happens down here in Southport. World-class views. It must be unique. We want to embrace a working river theme. You know, the history of the site is important, very similar to that of the Northport. And some of those remnants remain. You can drive down there today and still see some of the dredging equipment, some of the floats, some of those artifacts from the past that kind of really bring out the history of what this space was before. And then lastly, learning from COVID. When we think about what the vision for this space wants to be, we want to make sure that we're thinking about a development that is for all seasons, that has indoor, outdoor spaces that can connect, they're safe, they're flexible, and thinking about how we can really move forward what we've learned. So I also want to point out that as we've been looking at this planning effort, we've been looking at your goals, the City Council here. And in particular, there's 4 that I think that we're really hitting home on. Number 1, livable neighborhoods and housing. We believe that what you're about to see could be a really great place to live. That's a key component of the private sector's plans. Secondly, a sustainable environment, preserving and enhancing the natural resources. So that could be improving the water quality within the site itself, being mindful that we are redeveloping on a brownfield, which is a great thing if you can do that. But then also maybe there's opportunities for natural areas as you go along the flood wall further south. Opportunities to engage the arts, culture, parks, and recreation. And then I already mentioned earlier a connected community, whether that be by foot, by bus, by car, but then also using technology to promote an accessible site for people of all abilities and means. Also thinking through the comprehensive plan, a very significant effort that is guiding the decisions this community makes. And so similar to your goals, there's a lot of alignment there, but we want to make sure that, I think specifically that we are creating a connected development to the larger community. So the development program, this program is the result of interviewing the private sector stakeholders and the public staff members here in our design team. So our initial program here, thinking about potentially 30,000 square feet of office space, living space of about 60,000 square feet for multifamily, hospitality, which hotel could be potentially be 100 units, retail, thinking about 9,000 square feet there in flexible ways, potentially one moderate to higher end restaurant, taking advantage of some of the views to the river on their rooftops, bar, grill, pub, distillery, one that's more market-based. It could be a destination. And then making sure that what we do within the street network and within the trail system is complete. We want pedestrian-centric streets that promote a strong connection to the storefronts and what's happening inside the building to what's happening on the street level. Activating Ice Harbor, making sure there's plenty of parking, and then considerations of a dog park to support the potential recruits that the private sector might be seeing. Additional components of the maybe a longer term development, additional housing, more office, retail that is vehicular based, fast casual, something that folks will drive to. There's a lot of vehicles every day that go down 151 and then again on Highway 20. So the exposure to this site is tremendous, both to it and from it, as you'll see here in a minute. And then looking at other opportunities for recreation along the river, connecting the spaces by way of whether it be a bridge along the waterfront, potentially landing spaces for boats, greenways, vehicular underpass. So there's a number of items, and as Steve mentioned earlier, we can't do this all at once. But right now, we need to think about what's possible, and then work with you in the future to move things forward as it works for you. So a little bit more about the context, ownership, and circulation. Here is the Julian Dubuque Bridge. This is the Ice Harbor at the top of the screen. Currently, the flood wall is not buried in this portion of town. This is Highway 151 here. And so as we zoom in to this map here, we have been mindful of the existing infrastructure that the city currently has, and specifically water and sanitary. We've been working with Strand Associates to evaluate that and make sure that what we do now doesn't jeopardize future opportunities for infrastructure improvements. You can see here, this is the Port of Dubuque. Up here, the Grand Harbor Hotel. Over here, the water park. 3rd Street overpass, Hotel Julian. The proximity is tremendous. The connectivity as it exists today could be improved upon. And so thinking about, how can we potentially connect the waterfront? Are there opportunities to connect over here? And all of those are, at this point in time, I would just say opportunities. We don't have, we haven't dug deep into the details. I think we'd like to hear from you if this is something you're interested in, and especially the private sector as well. So we just want to acknowledge that we are being mindful that there is a lot of work that would be left to be done. Just a refresher on the site imagery. So this is looking easterly down 1st Street. You can see the Julian Dubuque Bridge in the background here, the Ice Harbor here. On this slide here, you can see the 2 historic buildings that are currently owned by the Newt family on the site, and preserving those to kind of, going back to that theme of a working river is something that's being considered. Some of the remnants, the existing conditions of the street, looking back towards downtown, and special thanks to the engineering department for going out and gathering some drone footage. But when you start to lift off here at 15 feet, 25 feet, 35, 55 feet, and you look around, and we'll show you what that looks like here in a minute. I mean, the views are tremendous, all the way up to the Lock and Dam, and even all the way further south down to the Julian Dubuque Monument. It is very well positioned from a view shed standpoint, and giving you the feeling of being on the water. So existing ownership, I mentioned. So the green is public ownership. This parcel right here is owned by the Iowa DOT, and then this parcel up here is owned by the Coast Guard. All of the other green parcels are owned by you. We'll call it salmon or orange-red color there is in private ownership and is being contemplated through private development. And I would also say that this parcel here, which is not on the water, is also being considered, which you own, the city. Existing circulation, I already pointed that out. Highway 20 bisects the site. You have the CN Railroad right here, Highway 151 right here. Now let's talk a little bit about the vision. So overall, going back to those themes that we shared with you earlier, we're really trying to create a walkable urban environment that creates a destination that is on the river. So views to the river, being able to walk out your front door, head south down the waterfront trail this way, or go up and around on First Street, going to the Port of Dubuque. Connecting it to the adjacent community is essential. But we also wanted to be mindful that we need to make the improvements work. And so we've been looking at creating an urban grid here to restore that through past development and changing ownership in terms of property. We've lost some of that. And so restoring that urban grid to create a walkable environment is also a key component to this. So zooming in here, again, East First Street up here on the north side. We see a new street that comes through here, preserving the Jones Street corridor through here, and then Terminal Street going to the south. You'll notice that right now First Street comes down and then heads south around here. What we're proposing is to create this very strong pedestrian promenade that effectively allows a mix of uses on the water. Think of a boardwalk or a waterfront that you may have experienced in larger communities where you can dine underneath a canopy of trees looking out over the water, potentially places for children to play, whether they be water jets or there could be other amenities within there. As we move further south down here, working with the stakeholders here, creating a very small venue that could have small performances of 600 people, 800 people, but then having cafe, potentially a new restaurant cafe here and potentially a new bar down here, activating this space in between through music, performance, creating really a destination that would complement the vision that ownership group has. Further south, you'll see here, looking at some natural play features, a dog park, walkways along an anticipated, at some point in time, the conversation about burying the flood wall and what that looks like would, we've been trying to be mindful of that and recognizing that there is a footprint that takes up. So we don't want to, subject you to any, potential redoing of that area. I guess a few other key points that we'll talk about here through the visuals is an opportunity right here to have first floor retail that would bring you into the site. On the roof deck, there could be outdoor recreation, it could be a pool, it could be tennis courts. And then right just south of that, looking at a building that in this particular site, it would fit well right here with some multifamily housing. Office here, which is designated by Keynote 12, and then additional uses that we mentioned earlier, a hotel, which is shown here as Keynote 23, and then vehicular based destinations, potentially office, being further into the site, places that once you've been there, you know where they're at and you can drive back there, but really activating the waterfront here and taking advantage of those views. As we move further south into the site, there is a 6 to 8 acres of development possibility that could take place down here. It could be a large office, it could be any number of uses, but you do have tremendous views to the river. And then this actually also sits on axes with Highway 151. As you come underneath the Grandview, and you come around the corner and you look straight down, you have that broad sweeping panoramic view of the Julian Dubuque Bridge. This would sit right below it, and so it can become potentially a beacon for what takes place here in Southport. So the proposed circulation, we've been working closely with the engineering community. We've got options. We don't have everything solved. We're looking here at what the possibilities are. So is there an opportunity here to rethink the Locust Street intersection? Can we go under Highway 151 on Jones Street potentially? Could we go over down here? Could we go over up here? All of those are opportunities that need to be contemplated through much more rigorous study. I think right now what we're trying to do is make sure that the concept, the spirit of this vision is something that this community supports. And then proposed land use, again, looking at retail, mixed use, potentially hospitality and multifamily residential, creating that walkable, livable urban environment that is on the river and for individuals to enjoy, both those that would be there, but then also those that are already living here. I think one of the other components to this, going back to here, is, are there opportunities to further connect by way of pedestrian improvements, potentially over 151 or around? All of those things should be considered as you move this forward so that we can take advantage of the investment that the individuals that currently have invested in, whether it be Lower Main or in the Northport, connecting all of these components to create a walkable experience. I already acknowledged that we have been working with we have met with the Coast Guard, the Canadian National Railroad, the Iowa DOT, and we'll continue to work with those agencies at the direction of city leadership when it's appropriate. So the experience that we wanted to share with you today is going to be illustrated through a series of visuals here. The first one is the perspective view as if you are driving across Highway 20 coming from East Dubuque to Dubuque looking north. And so what we've done here is taken the drone photography and overlaid a three-dimensional model to start to show you, how this could come together. And so you can see here again on the north, this first street that would turn into a pedestrian promenade connecting to Ice Harbor up here. There was a prior study done some time ago about creating a bridge over the flood wall to link the Northport to the Southport. So resurrecting those prior efforts to see if it makes sense. All of those are opportunities that need to be evaluated. You can see here a 100-unit hotel. This is currently shown as a parking structure. Depending on how the development pans out, that would work there, or there's potentially, you could have kind of a garden level parking structure with office or a number of uses on top of that. So very much being flexible, but by restoring that urban grid, you create a development framework that development has been using for quite some time. So when you start to think about the scale of the buildings and what's efficient from a construction standpoint, we want to be mindful of that as well. The second visual we'll give you is looking across Ice Harbor to the south. And you can see here creating we've worked hard to make sure that what happens here you can potentially see over the further westerly you are into the site. So as you go up in stories and elevation, being able to see over those buildings is a key thing, preserving those view sheds and sight lines. In the next photograph that we'll give you, it would be as if you're standing up here on the balcony of your apartment or potentially condominium looking north, which would be a really tremendous view. You could potentially, pull up in your boat, go out on the river, but having that opportunity to look north, take advantages of the Roshek building here off in the distance, the county courthouse, and even all the way up north towards Eagle Point Park. So the views here are unprecedented to the city and to the river. Next, we're going to look down the promenade, a whole host of opportunities. I think the point here is that we want an activated, pedestrian-centric plaza that is a linear progression as you move towards the river. We would need to make sure that we provide a fire lane to get through there. So there are some very tactical things that need to be considered as this plan moves forward. And what we're showing in these plans is we are respecting the existing First Street right-of-way. So that's why everything is south of that, which you own. As the city, you own that right-of-way, and being mindful of that. This is a view on top of one of the historic buildings, whether it's a mural, outdoor dining, potentially a small performance that could take place here on the stage with a backdrop to the river. And again, I want to reiterate that we don't see this as being something that would compete with other performance venues within the community. This would be very much a very small act that is something that would maybe, I think, Codfish Hollow or something like that kind of a venue, but right here in Dubuque. Let's see. The next slide here is showing a perspective looking down the street. This is the Julian Dubuque Bridge here in the background. And you can see that having a strong connection to the street, for those of you who, most of you I'm sure are familiar with the Roshek building on the west side as you walk down Locust, and you have that indoor-outdoor connection. That's something that we really want to embrace here so that there is energy and there is connectivity to the street life. So the character, this is what I was talking about. This is an example of what that might look like, having outdoor cafe spaces, embracing the working river, pedestrian connected open spaces, context-appropriate development. So we want to be mindful of the materials, make sure that it fits with Dubuque's history, and also be scale appropriate. These are all, this is a precedent project from up the river. Again, having that first floor, retail, potentially office if it was desirable, amenities for the residential component. And then on the public realm side, one of the things that we see is Jones Street as being a key complete street connector. And this is just one example. You could have bike lanes on both sides. The point here is making sure that we're mindful of multiple modes of transportation as we connect this. Alleyways present an opportunity for art, those that we create. We talked a little bit about the boardwalk and the promenade, having places for people to gather. And again, this is thinking about what could be. We realize that not all of this will come to be, but we do need to start somewhere that creates a destination and a draw for those that are looking to develop here. I would like, one of the key things we've talked about too is a place for all seasons. I didn't mention it earlier, but perhaps there's opportunities to program the waterfront, embrace the outdoors. It could be through skating, or it could be through just having, places where people can gather, whether they be around, fireplaces or whatnot in the wintertime, and creating a social destination. That's something that we'd like to see more of, and we believe that based on what we're hearing, those people that are in the 24 to 30 range, and then those that perhaps the family has downsized a bit, 50 plus, 55 plus, wanting that connected community with their own space. And then again, accessible for all people of all abilities. So with that, I'm going to stop here and ask the Conlin development team to share their perspective, and then we can go into any questions that you might have.
Could you go to the slide that just shows a plan view? Please.
Yeah.
Feel free to draw if you want.
Nope, no drawing. Well, good evening. I'm Matt Mulligan with Conlin Construction. I am not going to be texting, but I am going to at least refer to my notes here. So this conversation, as Jill had mentioned, started probably 6 or 7 months ago, at least internally. At Conlin, we, as you all know, and if you don't, company's 120 years old. Based here, headquartered in Dubuque, and we're actually one of the largest contractors in Iowa. And, the office that we were in was becoming a little tight. And we have since made a move, and in our mind, that was a temporary move. But what we knew was that we really wanted, wherever we wound up, to be a transformational move for not only the company, but also for Dubuque. And there's plenty of spaces that we can choose that are maybe out on the periphery of town, and we can build a big office, big warehouse, and so on, and that's great. But that's really not desired state. So, we look at ourselves as one of the preeminent employers in town, and we attract talent from a lot of different places. And frankly, there's a lot of companies in Dubuque that do the very same thing, and we're all really stuck against the same wall in some regards of trying to find what's that next great spot for Dubuque. And so the Southport came up, and that felt like an awfully big lift, and it is an awfully big lift. And as we started some conversations with the landowners that have been represented by Ryan, those were actually welcomed ideas. And so that's what really got us going towards the next step with Jill and her team, Ryan as well. So, like I said, we wanted, as you drive across the bridge, we all know this, that is an entry, that's a welcome to Dubuque. And so the skyline is beautiful, but as you look, what's right below you, maybe it paints a little bit of a different picture. And so the redevelopment of that, we think this is really the right time for that, at least to really start picking that apart. So as you look at this in front of you, so from the development perspective, what we feel is critical right now for us to really engage in conversations with Jill and her team is what's marked as number 5, number 12, 17, 13. So really what's waterfront, we'll call it. And we feel those are the critical spots, and getting that right the first time is important. And so as Steve had mentioned, let's be very strategic and slow here to some degree to make sure we do this right. And so his methodology is certainly accurate. What I can tell you is one of the largest challenges is, as you have probably seen over the last however long this has been worked on, as Jill mentioned, is you have to attract that first one down there. And that is a role that us as Conlin Construction, we want to play. And, we're one of the oldest companies in town, and so we feel it's prudent that we are down there and we can be that first one in to really encourage others to come make that investment. And what's been really interesting is I've spoken with a hotel developer. I spoke with a pretty large restaurateur. I've spoken with a very large apartment developer. And I've discussed really just in general what we're looking at here. And I said, what would you think about this? And the response was quite overwhelming. And so I would say that from an investment level and wanting to garner that interest from the marketplace right now, that is there. And so I'm encouraged to share that with you, because as these conversations continue between us, between city staff, I think it's important to keep in the back of your mind that at an investment level, so encouraging the private investment to really get involved, that interest is there. So that's an exciting piece. There's a lot of challenges, as Ryan had said. That Jones Street is blocked a lot. Certainly the infrastructure serving from around the harbor there can be challenging. So there are some conversations that most certainly need to occur. The infrastructure is old, to say the least. But I think what we have put together is a very progressive team that can work through those challenges. And I'll say this too. There's a lot of grant opportunities that are out there, and somebody is going to get those. There is a community that's going to get those. And so, I look at this as an opportune time for us to really go out and push for Dubuque to be the winner of that. And it's going to take the certainly city staff time, as was mentioned, and their expertise in that. It's going to take the private investment, and that's us. That's where we come in, and we feel we have the partners where we can really come through and make this successful. So this is an encouraging first step. I'm glad you got to see it and see the progress that we've made. It's been a lot of fun talking through it, and there's a lot of work yet to be done. But felt it was prudent. You were aware of that. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
And I'm going to do this in case the tall people come back up. And anyway, there's a button here that I forgot to mention. We're excited to share this vision with you that is a result of 4 or 5 months of planning, and we want to open it up to questions for any of us here. Anything you might want to know.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. We really appreciate you taking the time to show this to us and work through this potential idea here. So we'll open it up for questions and discussion at this point. We look very thoughtful up here this evening. Ms. Wethel.
One question I had, the renderings are beautiful. It appears that the majority of kind of that 19 through where 32 is raised to the level of the flood wall. So is that a first step as far as, I guess, in what degree, when, based on the renderings and the design that you have discussed so far, where does that start? Where does that end to bring up the land to the flood wall?
I think the intent here was to demonstrate that there could be an opportunity to pull up in a boat and access the site. Where it starts and where it stops really depends on ultimately the private sector. So it may not be nearly as long as what it's shown here in the final analysis. It might, I don't think it'd be any longer. But for the spirit of this concept, the flood wall would be buried, just as it is in a North Port here. And then think of this as a wide, 24-foot to 36-foot wide linear walkway that is on top of that flood wall.
Okay.
And then, so it's at that elevation, and then you come down a set of ramps to get down to street level. The idea here is that if we reuse some of the existing grandfathered in pilings that are out on the river, there might be a benefit to that. We don't know until we get to that level of detail. So I think at this point in time, the concept was to provide access for a boat to pull up to get into the site, maybe multiple boats. Does that answer your question? Or
I think so. And I'm asking this because I truly don't know the process to have the Corps of Engineers allow us to do something like that.
I would, I don't know if Steve, if you want to comment on the Corps of Engineering process. I don't want to pretend to be an expert in that, but Steve?
Sure. So right now, Assistant City Manager Terry Goodman's leading that conversation with the Army Corps. So as it can be a long process, as you can probably imagine. So Terry's set up, I think, 2 or 3 meetings so far with city staff and the Army Corps. Generally, we're hearing that through the federal infrastructure grants, the Army Corps is getting new project start money, and this would be a new project for them. Of course, we're competing, I think, almost nationally for that new project start money. So when I spoke to Terry last week, she basically said the city right now is in that pot of potential new starts, and she'll be working with all of our partners to try and get the city moved to the top of the list. But essentially, our 42-inch force main stabilization project, which is just happening downstream, is a similar process. So there's what the Army Corps calls like a scoping or planning process. They generally come up with a plan on what's going to happen, which we would hope would look very much like the North Port and how that wall is buried. Then they would have to go back and get design and construction money approved. The city would sign some agreements, and so it's a multi-year process for sure at the earliest.
And then, since you're here, the present slip docks, I know there are no permanent docks there. Is there an idea or a thought that's been discussed as far as I see there's places at number 9 to pull boats up, but individuals say that are maybe empty nesters or retirees that would like to have their boat available to them down there. Is there also discussion about more permanent docks in the ice harbor that would be part of it? Or
Yeah, and initially inside the flood wall gates, there's a plan there. So again, we're exploring different concepts, and sometimes you need to lay it out and see how people react to it. But the thought might be certainly for calm water, if you want to rent a paddleboard, stand-up paddleboard, or a kayak, the ice harbor is a great place to do that. In terms of driving your boat down to dinner, that's always a fun trip. The challenge with the ice harbor is the gates shut when the river hits river stage 16. So I think, as Ryan mentioned, there's existing mooring dolphins on the main channel. And the thought would be, how can we, if we do a condition assessment and they're found to be in good shape, how can we leverage those to provide alternative boat parking? Perhaps it's a small floating dock or something like that. Thinking very positively as the cruise boat industry increases up the Mississippi. If the North Port is full and we've got another boat on its way, perhaps in the future this could provide some additional flexibility for a third or fourth boat to perhaps dock. Again, we're just exploring ideas, but that was the general thought between that layout.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bethel. Before I open up for other questions, I think I could use some clarification, and it might help everybody else too. So, first of all, you're presenting this idea to us. I mean, this is the first time that the City Council has seen any ideas like this, so that's an important context there. But as far as, I heard you say a couple different times through this that asking for direction from council or, some sense of what our thoughts are on what you've presented to us. Is that generally kind of what we're looking for this evening? Is that the expectation here?
This evening, I guess that's up to you. However, we wanted to get in front of you. We know that you're going into goal setting and give you some topics to talk about during those discussions. So we're not expecting any sort of commitment, thumbs up or thumbs down. We just wanted to make sure that you had this information.
Okay, that's very helpful. So this is really high level.
Very high level.
Very much not, so really thinking about, I don't want to say blank canvas, but in a way, it's kind of what you've provided for us
it's a starting
here.
idea.
Yeah, as an idea of what could be here. The whole, as we've been saying a lot lately, the art of the possible.
Right.
Okay, all right, that's very helpful. Thank you. Yes, Ms. Russell.
Thank you. Well, thanks for this exciting introduction to the opportunities that would maximize that waterfront asset. As you describe it, it looks like a place that my family would really enjoy being able to go. I think what's important is I liked the key ideas that you stated in the very beginning, such as making sure it retains a sense of place, a partnership, preserving green space, a destination to attract the workforce. I think all of those things are really key into whatever comes to the final plan. And the last thing I just wanted to just throw out there is it's somewhat similar to some of the ideas we're talking about at Schmidt Island with the boardwalk and sort of thing. I just wondered if that's something that we would try to align so that those two places would have some connection, or if we're trying to be very unique and make this a totally separate kind of feeling there.
Right. Steve Brown and I are in weekly meetings with the DRA representatives to talk about their plans on Schmidt Island. And Steve and I, just this past Friday, we sat down with Alex Dixon and his team to talk about, make sure that they were aware of what we're looking at here, and got a very positive reaction. And the comment was, high tide raises all ships. No pun intended, but just that, they're excited to have some exciting spaces in town, and that there could be synergies between these areas.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah,
I'm just trying
okay.
to think of how to word it. It's a pretty picture. I like it. I like a lot of the ideas. This is a 5-year goal, I would assume.
If we look at the Millwork District and how much has taken place there in the past, when did that kind of start? 2006? So it takes a long time to build up an area. And where we start is with conversations between the public and private sector to see, okay, private sector, what are you trying to do? What makes that happen? And the conversations we've had is, okay, maybe we can support you by having a conversation and looking for a grant, or, connect you with the right people to talk about tax credits, whatever it might be. and just continue those conversations. But I would highly doubt that this is a 5-year plan. It's much longer than that.
Thank you.
Well, I have to say, there are some moments that are really fun when we get to sit from our perspective, and one of those moments is when you get to dream really big and think about, what things could really be, what it could look like. And for me personally, I mean, when I'm looking at all these renderings and the work that's been put into this, the thought that's been put into it, thank you, for, Mr. Mulligan, for coming up, and from the private sector, people thinking about what really could be here. I guess I just kept thinking, well, why not? Why couldn't we do this? And I think those are important questions to ask as we go through this, because there's always going to be something that stops us. I mean, when we start thinking about, okay, how are we going to work with the Army Corps? It's always a challenge, right? But they're also great partners, and we've pulled it off before. It's not that they don't want us to do things. It's just that they want us to do it in a way that fits with what the needs of everyone along the Mississippi waterway really are. I see the tunnel going under the railroad tracks in the picture that I'm looking at here. Some of us, I think, understand the challenge that brings, but I've also thought to myself, well, we did it before. We just pulled it off with the B branch and made that happen. So I think I guess what I would ask, for all of us as we think about this is that question of why not? That question of what could our riverfront really look like? It's, I think Ms. Roussell's right. There's a lot of similarities in some of the renderings I've seen for what Chaplain Schmidt Island could be. But the two of those together make a pretty exciting riverfront. We've been talking more about the North Port because of the conversations that we've had about the cruise ships and everything happening there. It is action-packed down there right now. In fact, I'm pretty sure there's another one coming tomorrow morning, if I'm not mistaken, because I saw the American Cruise Line buses sitting there waiting to be picking everybody up and moving along. I mean, it's almost a daily occurrence these days. We are very well situated right now to have a very exciting riverfront and downtown area that connects everything together. We've talked about when the millwork's still going. We've talked about Central Avenue. We're talking about Chaplain Schmidt Island. We're talking about the Southport. It's going to be difficult. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a ton of investment, but I think it's absolutely worth it to move forward, to think about all the exciting ways that we could be a city that really draws people in. So I'm generally very excited about this idea as I think about it in my head and think about what this really could be. So I know I appreciate this discussion, and I'm glad we're beginning it now. We're at the very beginning stages, the big high-level discussion of it. But I'm very appreciative that we're talking about this.
Great.
Yeah. Any other thoughts before we move on to the next topic? Well, thank you very much for everyone involved. I don't know if everybody involved now is moving on to the next session too, but yeah, if not, thank you very much for joining us this evening and sharing this with us.
Thank you. We'll make a transition here.
All right, sounds good.